This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, where we discuss all of the fabulous news in the wide world of sports. My name is Ben Brown. I am riding solo today. We got Alex, who's not here on Fridays as always, and Anthony just feeling a little under the weather today, just out of the studio for now. So it is just me riding solo on the show today. Got to start with Thursday Night Football last night. For once, literally for once, we had a very, very good matchup. Pretty good game as well. Kind of disappointed me after about the second quarter, but a very good matchup. Battle of first place in the AFC West between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Oakland Raiders. Kansas City Chiefs come out on top after a huge second quarter where they scored all 21 of their points to defeat the Oakland Raiders 21-13. Really, really big performance by rookie Tyreek Hill for Kansas City. He had 66 yards and a touchdown receiving, as well as a 78-yard punt return for a score. He was really the difference in this game last night. So I guess now, obviously, you have both teams 10-3. Kansas City does have the tiebreaker over Oakland, having defeated them both times this year, last night and then the first meeting out on the West Coast earlier this season. They also did defeat the Denver Broncos one time they played them, so that game, they have three games left now on their schedule. One of them is against Denver. So if the Broncos can somehow make up a game or two ground-wise, then they will be battling for the AFC West as well. But Kansas City are definitely in the driver's seat now with the victory over the Raiders last night. But you know what? I think in this game last night, I learned more about Oakland than I did about Kansas City. I was obviously not in the studio yesterday. Had I would have picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win, and I would have picked them to cover the spread, which was 3.5. That obviously did happen with an 8-point victory. But I think I learned more about the Raiders in this game than I did Kansas City. You look at Derek Carr, really, really struggled last night. 17 of 41, 117 yards. He didn't have any turnovers, but he did not throw any touchdowns as well. Definitely his worst game of the season. I realize he has the dislocated pinky problem. Last night out in Missouri, it was extremely cold, about 20 degrees. Derek Carr's from Fresno State. He plays here with the Raiders in the West Coast. He's not used to these cold weather games. He's never won a game in his career, although it is a young career, just a few years. He's never won a game in his career that was below 40 degrees. So the Raiders and Derek Carr are not a team, in my eyes, that can go into Kansas City, maybe Denver, New England, and win these cold weather games in the playoffs. And that's what they might have to do, especially since Kansas City, like I said, are in that driver's seat to win the division. Last night, the Raiders went from the number 1 seed before the game to the number 5 seed. Maybe they'll get a beneficiary of the doubt with the playoff system. Maybe they'll get the winner of the AFC South. Texans, Titans, Colts, a couple of those are indoors. Tennessee's not a very cold place. But you know what? Say they get by that game, then it could get pretty interesting. You're looking at Baltimore or Pittsburgh. Both of those places are very cold. Like I said, Kansas City and New England. It's going to be cold in January when they're trying to play for that Super Bowl berth. If the Raiders can't go in there and win in the cold, then I kind of question them. Although the Raiders did not look extremely well last night, I think you have to consider a few things. I already mentioned Carr with the weather and the pinky. Number 2, I think you have to credit the Kansas City Chiefs defense. The Raiders had 3 turnovers last night. They turned over the Chiefs 3 times. A couple of fumbles, Alex Smith interception. especially right in the beginning of the second half. You had Alex Smith throw an interception, and you had a fumble the very next play. They only gave up 3 points in that whole entire swing. You had a Janikowski field goal, and then I'm not sure if it was weather-related or not, but Marquette King gets a bad snap on another field goal attempt, so the Raiders only end up with 3 points having missed the second field goal. So you have to give the Chiefs a lot of credit there. If you win the turnover margin by 3, you're supposed to win a lot of these games, but yet they lose by 8. So, like I said, you have to give the Chiefs' defense a lot of credit. They played really well last night. The one downfall for them is they did lose Derek Johnson. He ruptured his Achilles for the second time in just over 2 years. And plus he's getting a little older, over 30 years old now, so he's going to be out for the entire season and probably leaning into next year as well. So you have to deal with making up with one of your best defensive players going forward. So that's going to be a little tough. But this team, Kansas City, still very, very good. Alex Smith, he was efficient. 17 of 26, 264, the 1 touchdown to Hill, and the 1 interception I mentioned. Not much on the running game, 65 yards on 27 carries, so just about 2.5 yards a pop. So not much there, but it was really just the story of their defense. Tyreek Hill, that kid, that young rookie is extremely exciting. He's really come on the last few weeks in particular, really since that Sunday night matchup against Denver where he had special teams touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and a rushing touchdown. Had another punt return touchdown last night. Kind of reminds me of Dante Hall-esque. Extremely, extremely fast. A little shifty guy, can make the first defender miss and then see ya. And he also is on the Chiefs, so I guess you can say Dante Hall-esque, like I said. But he just gives the Chiefs another playmaker on offense because they, in my eyes, they really don't have much. Travis Kelce, a huge game, 5 catches for 101 yards. He's now had over 100 yards in 4 games in a row. The only other guys to do that in the last few years have been Gronkowski and Jimmy Graham when he was on the Saints. So he's really emerging as one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the NFL. Jeremy Maclin still kind of battling injuries, but only had 1 catch last night. So you add Hill with Kelce. You still have Spencer Ware, who's a decent running back right now. So you're adding just some more playmakers to this really conservative offense under Andy Reid and Alex Smith. So I guess that's really good going forward playoff time because this is the way the Chiefs play. It's built for the playoffs. They play defense. They control the ball. They don't make mistakes. Although they did have the 3 turnovers last night, they don't turn the ball over really ever. So I guess this is really good. But like I said, I think I learned more about the Raiders in this game than I did Kansas City. The Raiders, honestly, I feel like they could have won this game. I mentioned the 3 turnovers. They only lost by 8. They give up a special teams touchdown, so their defense only gives up 14 points. Latavius Murray had a pretty good game running, 22 carries, 103 yards, and a touchdown. A lot of that came after Derek Johnson did get injured, but they were without their starting left guard, Kelechi Osemele. Kelechi Osemele, according to Pro Football Focus, is the highest-rated left guard in the NFL this season. They only ran the ball to the left side 5 times last night without him. And to me, that's a really, really big loss, not just on the running game, but also on Derek Carr. He was only sacked once, so that's not too bad. But it kind of gives you a little bit more uneasy because you have to worry about losing probably your best interior lineman that you've had this season. A little uneasy. You know, you're already having to play on a short week, having to go all the way from Oakland to Missouri within a 3-day rest. That's nothing you really want to have to do. A tough divisional game against a really tough side. I kind of feel bad for the Raiders in that instance. I would have loved to seen this be a Sunday night matchup. You have to travel on a short week. I mean, that never bodes well for the road team. So I guess I can give the Raiders a little bit of a credit there. But the loss is huge, as I mentioned, because now the division, I mean, it's still up for grabs. The Chiefs and them are tied, but the Chiefs do have kind of a half-game lead because they do have the tiebreakers. Similar schedules, a couple of games against divisional foes between the Chargers and the Broncos, respectively, so maybe you could see a few changes happen, but I mean, it wasn't really good for the Raiders last night, and in particular, Derek Carr, I guess, with his performance last night, the worst game of the season he's played, you can take a little bit of a hit on his MVP candidacy, but I think you have to realize every player has one bad game. You can't play lights out all 16 games. So it's not like, oh, one bad game, he's done. Like, their MVP race is wide open now. Derek Carr is taking himself out of it with a 117-yard performance. I don't think that's the case. I still honestly think he's the favorite. But this was the start of basically the fourth quarter of the season. This was game number 13. So you have 4 more games left. These teams, 3 obviously playing last night. So you still have 4 more games left to try and solidify yourself as a legit MVP candidate. You look at Matthew Stafford still in there. A couple of the guys in Dallas, although they are rookies. You have Ezekiel Elliott as well as Dak Prescott, who I think could throw their hat in the ring. Matt Ryan still kind of the dark horse in my eyes. Stafford and Derek Carr, the favorites to me. I still would give it to Derek Carr, what he's meant to this team all season, especially when they're trailing late in the second half. Just always overcoming adversity and winning the game. Although last night, not so much the case, but all season long, that's what you've seen with Carr. But anyways, like I said, Chiefs win 21-13, improved to 10-3. Raiders have a 6-game winning streak snapped. They also lose their first game on the road this season, and they are likewise at 10-3. So now we will move into the rest of the NFL schedule for this weekend. The Steelers are traveling into New York to take on the Buffalo Bills. The Denver Broncos will take on the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee, a very, very important stretch here. They are in a 3-way tie with Indianapolis and Houston for the division lead, all at 6-6. So the last 4 games could get pretty interesting. Tennessee having a really good year. Surprised they're at 6-6. The Washington Redskins will battle the Philadelphia Eagles in a very important game for both teams. The Arizona Cardinals will travel to Miami to take on the Dolphins. The Chargers will battle the Carolina Panthers after their embarrassing loss on Sunday Night Football last week to Seattle 40-7. The Cincinnati Bengals will take on the hopeless, winless Cleveland Browns. Oh, man, I thought the Browns would get a win this year, but now I really don't know. I guess if there is a week, you can maybe circle this matchup on Sunday. Browns coming off of a bye week. You're going to be seeing the return of Robert Griffin III under center since week 1. He had that shoulder injury, so he's back under center. He will be starting in this game. The Bengals are definitely shorthanded without a couple of their top playmakers in A.J. Green and Giovanni Bernard. So there is a chance there for Cleveland, but I will not pick them because I already made that mistake this year. I picked them week 1, and they let me down. So I just can't go back to them now. The Chicago Bears will battle the first-place Detroit Lions up in Ford Field. Houston Texans will battle the Indianapolis Colts. Both teams at 6-6, tied with Tennessee, as I mentioned. So a very important game here. Obviously, one team will knock the others from that tie. The Minnesota Vikings will go down to Jacksonville to take on the 2-10 Jaguars. Maybe the worst game of the weekend, the New York Jets travel out to Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California to take on the 1-11 San Francisco 49ers. Bryce Petty will be starting for New York, and Colin Kaepernick will be starting for San Francisco. A couple more games here on the schedule in the afternoon. The New Orleans Saints will battle the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay riding a really good winning streak right now at 7-5, tied with Atlanta for first place in the NFC South. Those Atlanta Falcons will be going out west to take on the LA Rams. The Seattle Seahawks will go up to Green Bay, where it looks like it's going to be snowing just like last week, to battle the Packers. Green Bay really a couple of games back of the Detroit Lions now, so they have to continue winning and playing good if they want to battle and try to get their way into a division crown or maybe a wild card. I think they'd have to win out to get a wild card, honestly. You look at New York, they're playing really well, although they have a tough game, and that will be the Sunday night matchup. They will be hosting the 11-1 Dallas Cowboys, the one Cowboy loss this year on opening day to those New York Giants. And then Monday night, we will preview that game Monday morning, is the Baltimore Ravens against the 10-2 New England Patriots, who now, as it stands right now, sit atop the AFC with the loss to Oakland last night. So we will preview some of these games really, really quickly. I want to touch on the Houston and Indianapolis game first. You look at this game, it doesn't really seem like one of those good games, but it is a very important game. Obviously, these two teams battling for the AFC South crown, and you have Houston at 6-6, the Colts at 6-6. The first matchup of the season, the Colts were dominating it, and then Houston comes back late. The game goes to overtime, and the Texans end up winning that game. This game will be at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. The Colts coming off a big Monday night win over the hopeless New York Jets. Andrew Luck had a huge game on Monday, 4 touchdowns. I'm going to give the edge to the Colts here. The Texans just simply not a good team. We've seen what they've been all year long. Brock Osweiler, in my opinion, is probably the worst starting quarterback in the NFL that we've seen all year long. I think they're really regretting giving him that contract they did. And they're a good, solid team. I mean, Lamar Miller's a really good running back. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's an elite wide receiver. The defense does not have J.J. Watt right now, but they're still a very, very solid defense. The one thing to me with Houston is the Texans is that Brock Osweiler is really just holding them back from being a potentially better team than they are. I wouldn't say they would be an elite team, but they'd be a much better team. They'd be better than 6-6 in my eyes with a better quarterback. I will give the edge to the Colts here. They're just really playing better right now. Andrew Luck played exceptionally well. Frank Gore's had a pretty decent year for them, although he is really up there in running back age. T.Y. Hilton, a monster game on Monday against Darrelle Revis. I will give the Colts the edge. They should have won the first matchup in Houston and let it get away late. I do not think that will happen again. I would give the Colts really the edge when it comes to the whole division now with 4 games left. Tennessee's still there. I probably like them better than Houston as well because they do have that nice balance with Marcus Mariota and DeMarco Murray. Even Derrick Henry you can throw in there. He's had an okay year with given opportunities. So I will give the edge to the Colts here. I think they win this game. I just don't have any faith in the Texans right now. I just can't really trust them to contribute and win this game. They've really, really struggled last few weeks, Brock Osweiler in particular. So I will give the edge to the Colts. I want to talk about the Seahawks and Green Bay game. Green Bay playing really well. A couple of wins in a row now, although they still sit at 6-6. A big road win on Monday night a couple of weeks back against the Philadelphia Eagles. And then they defeat those Houston Texans in a snowy, frigid game last week. Aaron Rodgers is still dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury. It's going to be interesting because you have Christine Michael. Christine Michael was a part of the Seattle Seahawks for so long. Then you saw the emergence of C.J. Prosise. You saw Thomas Rawls get back healthy. And then they cut Christine Michael, who's actually claimed by Green Bay just a few weeks ago. So you have that kind of aspect. Green Bay's top rusher last week was Christine Michael. So he's going to be seeing some playing time against his old foes out there in Seattle. It's going to be interesting to see how the Seahawks can sort of cope without Earl Thomas. Earl Thomas with the broken leg, he's going to be out the rest of the season, was placed on IR. He's really, in my eyes, the heart and soul of their defense. Last couple of years, Green Bay did beat Seattle in a game that did not feature Cam Chancellor, so you saw how Green Bay was able to execute with one of Seattle's safeties down, although Thomas and Chancellor kind of play different positions and are really different type of players. So we'll have to see how that goes. I would still give the edge to the Seahawks in this game. I don't really trust the Green Bay Packers, although they are getting sort of healthy at the right time, getting back a lot of key players on their defense. Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins are healthy, which they've been injured really all year long. The Green Bay Packers, it's kind of a tale of 2 seasons for them. And for me, it's on their defense. The offense has been getting a lot of criticism, Aaron Rodgers in particular, the running game. But the Packers' defense has been the one thing letting them down all season long. In games where the Packers give up 30 points or more, they are 1-5. In games where they give up 30 points or less, they've only lost 1 game. So it's really a matter of that if their defense can stop teams, the offense can do enough to win the game. You saw that last week. They only gave up 13 points to Houston. They win 21-13. A couple of weeks back, they get a good win over the Philadelphia Eagles. The defense is getting healthy at the right time. For me, I think it's a matter of the Packers just might be coming on a little too late. They're 6-6 right now, a couple of games back of Detroit. They will have a matchup in Ford Field in a couple of weeks, so you can sort of look to that game if Detroit do slip up here. But they're battling, in my eyes, the best team in the NFC, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. I realize the Cowboys are there, but I think if you matched them up head-to-head, I would give the edge to Seattle. So I think the Seahawks are going to go into Lambeau Field and defeat the Packers. I think it'll be a close game. I think Green Bay will keep it close. I don't see Aaron Rodgers really getting blown out. The defense is playing a lot better, as I mentioned. The offense is getting a lot more comfortable, kind of clicking on all cylinders again. So I will give the edge to Seattle. I just think they're a much better team. Thomas Rawls really came back to life last week, over 100 yards and 2 scores. They blew out the Carolina Panthers. The only knock, like I said, was the injury to Earl Thomas, which is going to be big. He's their best player on defense in my eyes. You have to kind of replace him against a top quarterback like Aaron Rodgers will be tough, but I'll give the edge to the Seahawks. And then lastly, I want to preview the Sunday night matchup. The Dallas Cowboys go into MetLife Stadium to take on the New York Giants. The Giants sit at 8-4. If Dallas can win this game, they will pretty much wrap up the NFC East division. They'd be 12-1. The Giants would be 8-5. Washington is still technically sort of flying under the radar, but they, have a tough game as well. The Redskins going in to face the Eagles. The Eagles only have one home loss this year, which came to Green Bay a couple weeks back, so they're a really good team at home. So I look at the Cowboys and Giants game. Like I said, the Giants, the one team to defeat the Cowboys this year. That was on opening day out in Jerry World. I'll give the edge to the Cowboys here. They're on an 11-game winning streak until I see that someone can knock them from the ranks of, or I shouldn't say the unbeaten, but until someone can stop their sort of streak they're going on right now, I will give the edge to Dallas. They have a little bit more rest, having played last Thursday against the Minnesota Vikings and winning a close game. So I'll give them a little bit of the edge. When I look at the Giants, it's really Eli Manning or nothing. They're not getting any contributions from the running game whatsoever. And Eli Manning has really been up and down this year. I thought he'd have a huge year after he did last year, but he's had some good moments, and he's had a lot of bad ones too. Last week we saw what he did against Pittsburgh with the red zone interception when they were driving there at the end of the first half. So I'll give the edge to Dallas. This Ezekiel Elliott and Dak Prescott train has just not been stopped really all year long. Even in week one, they could have won that game late had Terrence Williams not stepped out of bounds. So I will give the edge to the Dallas Cowboys. I think in a road game, probably a cold weather game. Looks like it's going to be about 37 degrees, maybe some rain, snow mix if it gets a little colder. I'll give the edge to the Cowboys. That just bodes well for their running game even more. Powerful offensive line, a couple more days rest. The Giants are still a decent team. I think they'll get into a wild card spot. I think Odell Beckham will probably have a good game, although he's been kind of crying a little bit recently, yet again. But so I think we'll have a good game. I think Eli will keep it close, but I just have more faith in the Cowboys than I do in the Giants. Just have more trust in them, and that's going to be my difference maker in the game here. So I'll take Dallas. As I mentioned, I will take the Colts, and I will also take Seattle over Green Bay. Those are my three picks of the week. Alex and I will be back in the studio on Monday to review and recap this week in the NFL, as well as preview the Monday night game. With that, I'll take my first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. After the break, we had the awards for college football last night. We'll also have the Heisman Trophy presentation tomorrow. We will recap the awards last night, as well as preview the Heisman right after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So kind of some breaking news in here now. A couple of days ago, it seemed like Lane Kiffin was going to be the new head coach for the University of Houston. Lane Kiffin, obviously the offensive coordinator for Alabama right now. Kiffin was set to be the head coach within the last couple of days. Everyone thought he was going to be the head coach. It made sense. But now it seems like Houston have kind of had a change of direction. It looks like those reports were maybe false. Nothing was really offered. And they've actually gone with Major Applewhite as their coach, former quarterback at the University of Texas. So Houston's athletic director, Hunter Yurachek, went to mention about the hiring of Major Applewhite as the coach. He said, quote, "We wanted a coach with great integrity who believed in our mission and truly believed in our student-athlete experience. We had our sights set on a focused competitor who has demonstrated success and possesses a deep connection to college and high school football in the great state of Texas. As this process was completed, it was clearly evident the only individual to offer our position to was Major Applewhite, and he was indeed the right man to lead our program. Kind of interesting there. It seemed like, obviously, Lane Kiffin, we didn't hear any reports specifically, but then again, we didn't see any press conference or anything. So I guess I can understand. It kind of caught me by surprise just now when I read it. But interesting, when I saw that Kiffin was initially going to be going to Houston, I was kind of scratching my head a little bit. I realized Lane Kiffin obviously wants to become a head coach again. He went to Alabama to become an offensive coordinator, and it's working wonders. So I get that. He wants to become a head coach again, although he has had the disasters with USC and Tennessee in the NFL with the Raiders. So I get it. But when I saw that he was going to Houston, I was like, wait, what? Like, I figured a guy like Kiffin would only come back to becoming a head coach if it was for an absolutely elite coaching job. Nothing was really open. You saw LSU keep Ed Orgeron. Oregon signed Willie Taggart. You had Houston go with Tom Herman. So the really only opening was the University of Houston. So I guess if he was really dead set on becoming a head coach again, he could go to Houston. So it made sense to me, but I was kind of like, man, I thought that Kiffin would only come back for a really serious elite coaching job again. And I guess that didn't happen. You have Major Applewhite as the coach now. So, I mean, I guess that means Kiffin's still the offensive coordinator now at Alabama, which, I mean, that's definitely not a bad situation. You're going to be the favorite to win the national championship yet again as an offensive coordinator. You're going to be having Jalen Hurts still. He's only a true freshman, so, I mean, it could be a lot worse, right? I mean, I wouldn't jump ship as the offensive coordinator at Alabama to go to Houston, personally. I would stay there until a really elite coaching job opened, honestly. So, I mean, I guess the move kind of makes sense, but kind of interesting. We thought that Lane Kiffin was going to be the head coach of Houston, but not so fast, my friend. So, that will transition us into, we'll still talking about some college football, but we had the award show last night. So, Lamar Jackson from Louisville, he wins the Maxwell Award as the nation's top player. And then this is just so confusing to me. You have Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson, who wins the Davey O'Brien Award, which is the award for the best quarterback in college football. So how does Deshaun Watson win the best quarterback in college football award, but Lamar Jackson wins the best player in college football award when Lamar Jackson is a quarterback? I realize we see this kind of stuff all the time. Think about the NFL. You have the MVP award, and then you have the Offensive Player of the Year award. It seems like it's never the same guy. The MVP award could be won this year, I'm going to say Derek Carr. The Offensive Player of the Year award could be going to a guy like maybe even Ezekiel Elliott with the season he's having. So it's kind of confusing to me how you can win one award on offense but not the Offensive Player of the Year award. It's just kind of puzzling. And here, same thing. You have Jackson and Watson, who are both quarterbacks, but yet Jackson wins the Best Player of the Year award, but Watson wins the Best Quarterback, although Jackson is a quarterback. It's kind of confusing to me, you know what I mean? But, I mean, I guess this kind of bodes well for Lamar Jackson's Heisman case. Most often, the player who wins the Maxwell Award does win the Heisman Trophy as well. We'll find out tomorrow. So Jackson beat out Baker Mayfield, quarterback of Oklahoma, as well as Michigan's sort of all-purpose linebacker, running back, punt returner, whatever you want to call him, Jabril Peppers. They are both Heisman finalists as well. And then another thing that did not make sense to me last night. So you have Jabril Peppers, obviously the lone defensive player that is a Heisman Trophy finalist. But you have Jonathan Allen. He wins the Chuck Bednarik Award for the best defensive player in college football. He's a defensive end for Alabama. He's had an absolutely fantastic season. How can Jabril Peppers be the lone defensive player in the Heisman finalists, but not win the Best Defensive Player of the Year award? It makes literally no sense to me at all. I'm not sure who's voting for these awards and for these finalists and everything, but it's pretty screwed up in my eyes. I realize Peppers gets a lot of media recognition because he's one of those few guys now that does it all. Plays offense sometimes. He plays safety. He plays linebacker. He'll rush the passer. He'll be a punt returner. He does everything. And there's, like I said, there's very few guys that do that nowadays. You look at college football 15, 20 years ago, almost everybody did that. Nowadays, not so much. Really, no one plays both ways. And in Pepper's instance, all three ways. So I give him a lot of credit for that. But how can Peppers be a Heisman finalist and the only defensive player to be a Heisman finalist but not win the Best Defensive Player of the Year award, the Chuck Bednarik Award? It makes no sense to me at all. That's kind of why I've said this before, and I'm not really a big fan of the Heisman. I think it's one of the most overrated awards in all of college football. When you look at the Heisman Trophy, the last defensive player to win this award was Charles Woodson from Michigan in 1997. So over almost 20 years now. The last one before that, also a Michigan guy, Desmond Howard, 1991. So if you look at the last 25 years, you've had two players that were defensive players win the award. I realize they played a little bit on offense as well as wide receiver, but primarily a defensive position. So the last 25 years, you have two defensive players. The Heisman Trophy is basically only given to running backs and quarterbacks. If you're a wide receiver, like we have a finalist this year that's a wide receiver. We have D.D. Westbrook from Oklahoma, fantastic wide receiver. He won the award for best college wide receiver last night. You know what I mean? So he's an absolutely fantastic wide receiver. But he has no way of winning this award. The Fred Biletnikoff Award, that's the nation's best receiver. He won that award last night. He had 1,465 yards and 16 touchdowns. So a fantastic year, D.D. Westbrook. But he has no chance of winning this award, the Heisman, tomorrow. You have Jabril Peppers, who honestly shouldn't even be a finalist. I mean, I would put Jonathan Allen over him. Jabril Peppers just kind of gets a lot of coverage because he did it all this year, I should say. So you can throw him out of the ring. So now you have three more finalists: Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, and Lamar Jackson. Baker Mayfield did not win any awards last night. What makes you think he's going to win the Heisman? You can throw him right out of the mix. So that leaves you with Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. Those are going to be first and second in my eyes in the Heisman. Lamar Jackson wins the Maxwell. Deshaun Watson wins the Davey O'Brien. So they each have an award win last night. So you could make a claim for really both of them. This award is going to go to Lamar Jackson, though, kind of by default. This is a really down and bad year when it comes to the Heisman. You don't have any real standout performers all year. You had Jackson really for the last maybe 3 weeks kind of fall out of the limelight when it comes to the Heisman. Bad game against Houston. They lose their season finale against Kentucky, who's unranked in a rivalry game. So you have Lamar Jackson and Louisville with 3 losses. You have Deshaun Watson, just 1 loss with Clemson in the playoffs. So I think that gives him a little bit of an edge. But he didn't have any standout Heisman moments. You could say head-to-head, Lamar Jackson played better than Deshaun Watson in the game Louisville played Clemson. So this award's going to go to Lamar Jackson kind of by default. A bad year for the Heisman. Just no real standout performers this year. It's going to go to Lamar Jackson. Some of the other awards last night that were given out, USC cornerback Adoree Jackson wins the Jim Thorpe Award winner. That's the nation's top defensive back. He's the 3rd straight junior to do so. Adoree Jackson, a fantastic player, also a really good punt returner. He's going to be a top pick in next year's draft if he decides to come out, which I obviously think he will. Texas's Deontay Foreman becomes the 3rd different Texas running back to win the Doak Walker Award as the nation's top running back. He led the nation in rushing with 2,028 yards. He also did say he's going to be going into the NFL draft already. No real surprise there. Zane Gonzalez of Arizona State receives the Lou Groza Award. That's the top kicker. We have the Array Guy Award, which is the best punter. It goes to Utah's Mitch Wishnowsky. Another Australian, the Australians are kind of revolutionizing the punting position. You have Pittsburgh running back James Conner. He earns the Disney Spirit Award, just one of the most inspirational players after overcoming cancer. And then the last award, you have Colorado's Mike McIntyre. He wins the Home Depot Coach of the Year award. Just a great year for Colorado. Top 10 finish right now within the college football playoff polls. Missed out. Did not win the Pac-12, but a very good season at 10-3 with Colorado. I mean, you can't make any real claim that, I mean, maybe there's other guys that could have deserved it, but Colorado really that one team that kind of flew under the radar of the top 5 power conference schools. So I can't make any sort of claim about that one, that McIntyre probably shouldn't have won it because he probably should have. But, I mean, some of these awards in college football, like I said, man, it's just not something I agree with. How can Jabril Peppers be a Heisman finalist but not win the Best Defensive Player of the Year award? It just doesn't make much sense to me, and I'm just not a big fan. But anyways, we have the Heisman Trophy presentation tomorrow. It's going to come down to Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson, I think, is going to win it and honestly should win it. Had a fantastic year, not just throwing the ball, but also running it. Over 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns rushing, in addition to 30 touchdowns through the air and almost 3,400 yards. So can't make any claims there, although it was a really weak year for the Heisman in my eyes. So anyways, we'll take our last break. After the break, we'll talk a little bit of baseball. As the winter meetings kind of roll down, we had a deal last night involving Dexter Fowler switching teams within the NL Central. Still a few top guys technically out there on the free agent market, and we'll kind of talk some winners and losers of free agency so far in baseball right after the break at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
So Dexter Fowler, I mentioned he will be switching teams in the NL Central. He's going from the world champion Chicago Cubs. He's going to go down the road to play for the St. Louis Cardinals. This deal was reported yesterday. We don't have any real specifics on the deal as of now. Dexter Fowler tested free agency last year, but decided to sign a one-year deal with the Cubs, and honestly, it worked out for him, having become a World Series champion. He led off Game 7 with a home run, so he was very, very important to the Cubs, not only in the regular season, but also in the postseason as well. Last year, Fowler batted .276, so not a bad year as a leadoff guy. 13 home runs, 48 RBIs, also 13 stolen bases. For Fowler, the big contribution is what he can do out in the outfield. A very good fielding center fielder, something that the Cardinals are trying to strengthen up. You know what I mean? So they tried to get Adam Eaton from the White Sox, but then he got traded to the Nationals. So it was kind of like best case scenario. Fowler, one of those guys, just kind of falls into the same mix as a lot of them, that once they get the ring, then they're all about the cash. You see this happen in all sports. So I'm not really surprised that he switched teams to go from the Cubs to kind of go to the Cardinals a little bit. Going to be playing. They actually open with a series between each other on opening series weekend on April 2nd. So kind of surprised that he decided to switch just teams within the NL Central, but kind of familiarity is something I guess you can look at as to why it maybe happened. But the Cubs obviously signing John Jay last week, who can play out in the outfield, a really good fielding outfielder, the highest percentage ever at 96.6 fielding percentage out in center field, a guy who can swing the bat a little bit too. So you have him there who can replace Fowler. You have Kyle Schwarber coming back who can play the outfield when he's healthy fully, recovering from the knee injury, just played DH out in the World Series. So the Cubs have options, Losing Fowler is not that big of a loss. We'll have to see how much exactly he is getting from the Cardinals. We're really not sure. They're going to be having a press conference today, actually in just about a little over 20 minutes, to introduce the signing of Dexter Fowler. So I'm sure we'll have more information then, but obviously we will not be on air then, so I can't exactly tell you how much Fowler is going to be getting. But I think it's a very good sign for the Cardinals, a team that just missed out on the postseason last year, had a lot of injuries. They're going to be losing Matt Holliday out in the outfield, obviously signing with the Yankees last week. So you bring in Fowler. You still have Matt Carpenter, who's a really good hitter and a really good player. You have some good pitching with Adam Wainwright. So the Cardinals are still a very good team. Kind of the success, just having it all decade, really, the Cardinals. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But they've just been really successful within the past few years. The recipe that they have just consistently winning for them. And they're still going to be a good team. They bring in Dexter Fowler. It's a really good signing. When you look at the rest of MLB free agency, as really the first week here is kind of winding down, a lot of the big-name guys are gone. There's still a few out there. Kenley Jansen, although it looks like he might be going to Miami on a huge deal we reported earlier in the week. Nothing is official as of yet. The one guy who's really out there that's kind of missing out in my eyes is Edwin Encarnacion, formerly of the Toronto Blue Jays. He rejected an $80 million offer earlier from Toronto to try and test the waters out in free agency, but it's not really worked out. I think some of that has to do with the fact that he's really just a DH. You can maybe put him at first base, but he played DH the last few years for Toronto, so you can kind of throw the National League teams out of the mix because they obviously don't have a DH. So I think that's the one thing that's kind of been hurting him. There was a big hole with Boston, but then they went out and signed Mitch Moreland, so obviously they're not going to be looking at Encarnacion. The Blue Jays signed Kendry Morales, so they have their DH now with Morales. They're not going to need Encarnacion. A lot of other teams kind of decided to go otherwise. Houston went with Carlos Beltran. The Yankees have Matt Holliday, who could play DH. The Rockies went with Ian Desmond to play first base, so they're not looking at Edwin Encarnacion. So he's kind of that one guy lost out there with no big team yet, and he turned down an $80 million offer. You imagine he's not going to get anything remotely close to that now when he signs. He's probably going to take a pay cut with an opportunity. He could have gotten a lot more from Toronto, so he kind of made the mistake there by wanting to test the waters, and it's not really going to work out for him, I don't think. We'll have to see where he goes. Maybe by next week we'll have something to break, but we really aren't sure as of right now. Some of the other winners and losers in free agency in my eyes, I think you have to look at the Sox with Boston and Chicago. The White Sox and Red Sox, I think, are both winners in that deal. We talked about it on Wednesday with Anthony. The Red Sox get Chris Sale, a legitimate ace. That's always a great thing with an already really good offense. And then you have the White Sox getting a lot of top prospects from Boston. Yoan Moncada, one of the best prospects in all of baseball, as well as a few pitchers they got so they can try and rebuild their franchise. Obviously, getting rid of Sale is a good move in my eyes, a guy who only pitches once out of every 5 days. You can get some guys who can contribute right away. A couple of years, become really good players and build towards your future. That's kind of how it gets done. I think the Yankees are winners in my eyes. They did re-sign Aroldis Chapman, which is obviously a really good thing, the best closer in baseball. Pretty hefty contract. I mean, you guys heard it yesterday with Alex and Anthony. But they got some prospects for Aroldis Chapman when they traded him to the Cubs, and then they get him right back just at a higher price point. So they're kind of just paying to bring in those prospects, if you look at it that way. So the Yankees can build around some of these young prospects. They have a legitimate closer in Chapman who can just lock the door and not let anybody in the ninth inning. So I think that's a really good deal for them. The Giants bring in Mark Melancon, a really, really good closer who's been efficient the last few years with the Nationals and with the Pirates. The closing position was the one problem the Giants had last year. Their bullpen let them down all year long. With Melancon, I don't think that will be the case, so they should be back in the mix of things next year. A couple of the losers, I really think you have to look at Toronto. I mean, they're losing out on a couple of really good players. Obviously, they moved on past Encarnacion with Morales, as I mentioned, but he's going to be a big bat to replace. He had 41 home runs last year. You're also, looks like you're going to be moving on from Jose Bautista, getting pretty old out there in the outfield, so you're going to lose out on some offense from him. This is a team that battled last year in the wild card, won the wild card game, really in due part to Encarnacion's home run. So you're going to have a lot of offense to replace. and I'm just not sure if they're going to be able to do it. They're pitching not really, really good. Aaron Sanchez had a decent year, but nothing really, really good that sticks out and stands out to me. You look at Texas, I think they had a nice offseason. You bring in Ian Desmond to play first base to an already really, really good offense last year. So I think Texas made some good moves. Maybe Cleveland, you could say, is kind of a loser. Didn't really do much since the World Series. Are going to kind of gamble on the roster they had this year, which worked out, but they played kind of over expectations than they were supposed to. So maybe they have a disappointing year, kind of come back down to earth. I don't really think so, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't know. Baseball is kind of those one thing that I like, that the offseason is so short. I mean, we're technically in the offseason right now, but yeah, we have just as much news going on in baseball as we do in the whole entire sporting world right now. So it's really, really interesting. I do love it, and I love my baseball. Jeremiah and I do the baseball show every Wednesday. We record that. So it's always a great thing, and we're just a couple of months away from pitchers, catchers, meeting for spring training. A little after that, you have positional players, spring training games, and then the start of April, you have the season again, which in my eyes is definitely too long. I would trim it to 100 games, but still, I mean, every game is seriously really, really important. When I look at baseball, you have every team's going to win 50, and every team's going to lose 50. It's what you do with those other 62 that really matter. So you kind of can trim the season into thirds almost, focus on each third, move your way up the standings, get into the playoffs. Then from there, really anything can happen. Starting pitching, bullpen, opportunistic hitting can kind of get it done and carry you for a month and go on to the World Series like the Cubs didn't win it. So, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Next week, we'll obviously get more deals in baseball going on, so we'll report those here, as well as other stuff in the world of baseball, or is anything in general. Football, basketball, soccer, hockey. I mean, this is the sports show after all. We're supposed to talk about sports. Anyways, I think that's going to conclude the show for today. Felt like we had a great show. Talked a lot of football, college football, talked some baseball. My name is Ben Brown. For Anthony and Alex, who are not here, this is us signing off at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. We will be back on Monday to review all things sports, probably talk about the Heisman Trophy, talk some NFL news, as well as other stuff in the wide world of sports. Goodbye, guys. Have a good weekend. My name is Ben Brown, as I said, and I will see you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.